This is RICKY, the YouTube Tech Guy. Hey guys, so today we are here to bring you the Galaxy Note 8 camera review. So we're going to review just the camera itself, and then we're going to put it up against some of the top other smartphones on the market to see how they compare. Now, I'm going to do a brief overview on the comparison part because this week we have full-on comparisons coming between the S8 Plus, which, yeah, there's a difference actually. Maybe software, but there's a big difference. iPhone 7 Plus, you have the OnePlus 5, and also the LG G6. So all of these camera comparisons will be coming down later this week, so make sure to subscribe to check all of them out. Now let's get to the Note 8 itself. So first and foremost, the low light on this device is just amazing. I will say that it really has impressed me, and it's done something that Samsung, I felt for a while, was having issue with because of their software technology, and that is it got rid of the haze in the black. You'll see this later when comparing to the S8 Plus, but usually with black, if there was a light on it, there was a bit of a haze, and it just didn't make the photo look as good as it could. And other cameras did not have that haze. They might have had more of a lens flare, but this one has the happy medium between all of these features. So again, we'll get to that when we do the full comparison, but really great low light, possibly the best current low light, knowing that the iPhone X, iPhone 8, iPhone Edition, whatever it's going to be called, isn't out yet, as well as we haven't yet got our LG V30. Hey LG, send us that. Alright, next over we have the details category. Now details are always really important, and by the way, if you haven't looked at our camera comparisons before, we don't do the outside bright day photos because what the hell is the point? Every camera can do that. I like to do more extreme results so that you guys understand that, hey, even in these kind of extreme conditions, this is what you can expect. So in details, we zoom in, and this phone does a really good job of details, as usually Samsung does. On any detail comparison between other phones, Samsung is always one of the top ones. They get a lot of details in the shot. So the dual pixel camera here really does a good job of making sure the focus is instant, because all I do for this photo on every phone is I tap right here and take a photo. So if it doesn't focus on time, if it's not clear across the board, and this is the difference, that while most phones get the inside pretty sharp, they tend to get really fuzzy on the sides, and this one you can still read pretty much every title on the side. So really good. Again, it'll be a much more understandable comparison when comparing to the rest. Now, as for color reproduction, this has always been a sore spot for Samsung, and I'm not saying it's the best one. It's actually not going to be the best when it comes to color reproduction, but overall it does a much better job than past Samsung smartphones. They are really upping it, especially when it comes to skin tones. That's really been the problem for Samsung, I would say. That the skin tones have just never been as good, and on this one it does a much better job than before. And overall, even in the white, you can definitely see the different shades of white, as again, you couldn't really before when color reproduction. So with color reproduction, it's still getting skin tones much better than it did before, but I still wouldn't rank it the best when it comes to color reproduction. Now, how about selfies? Now, this is called the extreme selfie test. Now, what I mean by that is you have a very dark area, which shows us if the phone's going to bring a lot of noise and fuzziness in really low light scenarios for taking a selfie. And on the other side, you have the really bright area, which, as you'll see later, some phones kind of wash out because it's kind of like the sun. When the sun's right behind you, it tends to lose detail. The Note 8 is the best one I have yet to see when it comes to selfies out of the biggest four out of the 6 phones that we tested against. So overall, it does a really good job of the dark area. So it does a really good job, not the best out of the dark area, but it does a really good job of that. However, on the other side, on the bright area, it really does a good job. You can see my wife's dress in that photo, and definitely you can see every rail easily, and even pretty good detail on the green. But where it really does the best job, of course, is actually in terms of the person itself. It has the best light and shadow combination I have seen. And again, we'll go over this at the comparison towards the end, that it really is the best combination of that. Now, what about the lens blur effect? So the lens blur is like a lot of other smartphones where it doesn't do as good of a job in low light, and depending on how your hair is, that can actually make a difference too. My hair was pretty much growing out on this day before I took a haircut the next day, and on this day, it really kind of messes with the texture here. You can see like that when I have like a little bump in my hair, it kind of messes up, and it really just kind of doesn't look as good. And this is in a low light setting in a mall. And overall, it looks great on the camera, or sorry, on the phone, and that's what's really interesting. But when it comes to actually seeing it on a computer, that's when it doesn't look as good. But on a phone, it looked amazing. And then and then an actual commenter said like, "Hey, it actually looks pixelated when you really zoom into it." And I'm like, "Really? It looks great on my phone," but I didn't notice it. So that's always with the Samsung screen looking amazing. How will it look actually on other people's displays is one thing you have to keep in mind. So overall, I would say it has the same tendencies of low light areas, and again with some hair or some off parts that it doesn't do as well in. Now, however, again, when you do it in a bright area, it looks much better. Now this did test its high dynamic range because of the fact that I'm in a darker shade area, whereas the building behind me is in a very bright area, so keep that in mind. And overall with this one, including with my head, it did a much better job. It all pretty much got in there. It had a little problem with this side, on this side, but overall it did a much better job and getting the details really good, even distinguishing the black on my jacket to the black in the back where the lights were for tickets. So overall, this was a great job. And again, so in daylight, it's going to do a better job. And it even did a good job with the bumps on my head, my natural bumps, because I have bumps naturally on my head that actually stick up a little bit here and there. So with my haircut, it actually did a much better job compared to if your hair is messed up that day. So if your hair is messed up, your live blur might be messed up. I guess that's the thing you can take away from it. However, with objects, it does a perfect job. And that is typical from what we've seen from most dual lens cameras. The objects are definitely going to be more always just coming out a better overall photo, and it really does a great job when it comes to objects. Even say like when the iPhone, it couldn't do a picture of a person in low light with a portrait mode. However, it could do a portrait mode of an object. Objects are just easier than people. I'm not sure really what's in the software that makes it that way, but objects are always much easier to do a lens blur or portrait mode comparing to the actual person. Now let's get to the comparison, guys. So this is obviously one of the biggest things is, okay, well, all right, the camera, most of these photos look amazing, most of these photos look great, but how is it actually going to be when I use it on a day-to-day basis instead of using another phone? So let's get to that. So first, again, the low light comparison. And here's where you can really see what I was talking about earlier with the haze. And you can definitely see it between the Note and the S8 Plus. The S8 Plus has a very strong haze and it has a very strong lens flare, whereas the Note 8 controlled it by far the best. Now, are these cameras the same? Yes. Is the software the same? Obviously not, because that's the only difference between these two, is software enhancements, tweaks that Samsung has done since the S8 Plus launch. So the Note 8 does have a much better camera than the S8 Plus in low light. Now, compared to the G6, again, it controls the lens flare a lot better on this side of it compared to this side. You can see that lens flare really kicking up on the sides, so it does a much better job of that. But overall, everything else, I would say the ground, I like the way it looks better on the Note 8. And not going on the wide angle camera, it seems like they both equally pick up at least the Old Navy part as well. But again, because it took in so much light with the lens, that's where it kind of is faded compared to the Note 8. And we'll see that as well with the iPhone 7 Plus as well. So as we zoom into the iPhone one, because the iPhone let in more light, you can see side by side that it's washed out a bit more. You can't really see the blue as much as you can see it on the Note 8. Overall, though, I would give iPhone easily the second place between these two, And keeping in mind that we don't know what enhancements the new iPhone is going to have, I would say rank these. The Note 8 does take it, so it is currently the best in low light that I have yet to see. The iPhone 7 Plus would be second, followed by the G6, followed by the S8. Now that's my understanding of it. Your eyes might see differently here, so let me know which one you thought was the best in low light down below. And now for the selfies. Selfies are very important to a lot of people, so it's definitely a standout here. Now, first I will say that these were all taken at the same angle, at the same distance. So why is the iPhone more zoomed in? Well, it's because the iPhone has the least wide angle lens. It's one of the things that I really hope the new iPhone fixes, because currently the iPhone, it's just so outdated in terms of having a very old-fashioned lens instead of a wider angle. So that's the big thing about the iPhone. That's also why it's darker than the rest. The iPhone is darker than the rest because it doesn't have the wider aperture that would allow more light in. So that being said, remember when I was talking about that I thought the Note 8 did the best light and shadow difference? This is what I mean. You don't really get that much shadow on the S8, and on the G6 you get a little more shadow, but you lose a lot of the coloring of your actual skin tone. So on the Note 8, it actually gets that perfect of not being too brightened with their software effects, and all of these had all their beauty modes and all that crap taken off. But you get a much better shadow and detail in this shot versus this shot. You can kind of tell on my forehead, you can see, like, because I'm sweating, the glistening coming from the side on here, where you still see a lot of the detail on it, whereas on here it's kind of washed out. So that's just an example of it. Overall, between these, I do have to give it to the Note 8 being the better overall one. Now the S8 Plus got a little bit brighter on this side, but it got also a little bit brighter on this side. The kind of brightness took over, I would say, on this photo, where again, it just did the best overall job between the two, and without getting a little bit of the white balance off, which that's, I would say, the main problem of the G6, it's the white balance is off. Now the iPhone is just overall dark. It gets a little too much shadow, I would say, although again, the glistening, you could see the detail is really good where it is. But overall, it just doesn't give as nice of a shot as the Note, in my opinion. You might say like, oh, I like the detail better on here, but I think the better overall shot of what you would want with the wider angle, with the better control of bright and dark, is much better on here than it is on here. Overall, I would rank it, again, the Note 8, I would say for detail, the iPhone 7 would be the second best, whereas I would say the bright and dark would be really good on the G6. And then for the S8 Plus, I would say it's the best second overall shot. So yeah, the selfies are very subjective. It depends on the person. Again, let me know which one you thought was the better selfie in the comments section down below. And then we finally go to the last one, which is the dual lens comparison. And again, we will be going much deeper during the week on a one-by-one comparison to really test these out. So with this, we put them all next to each other, and I took the 4 dual lens phones that I have, which is the Note 8, the iPhone 7 Plus, the OnePlus 5, and the Moto Z2 Force. Now, the Moto Z2 Force is easily the darkest of the two, and again, you needed good HDR to not have this, and the Moto Z2 on all of its, as we'll see in the comparison to it, just is darker than all the others. I'm not sure, I have to check the aperture for this one, or maybe just doesn't have HDR always on by default. But it really just, you can see the difference in the low light. The look is overall good in terms of the live blur around the edges. It doesn't do a bad job of that, but it just really is dark compared to the other ones. Now on the iPhone, you'd still get a little bit darker, especially if you put them up next to the other two, which I would say are the better ones. This one is going to be definitely a bit too dark for a great shot, I would say. and it does have a little kind of issue with the clipping right here, but overall a really good quality shot. I would just say it's a little bit darker, especially when compared to the other two. Between the other two, I would say the OnePlus 5 easily does the best coloring, just because, as you can see with the Note 8, it has a bit of overall kind of the sun taking over the color in the white balance, as where the OnePlus 5 doesn't have that issue. And finally, I would say the OnePlus 5 does a good job. It does, again, a little bit of an issue with kind of differentiating things in the background and how much intensity the blur is. But overall, I would say the OnePlus 5 might have been the best blur shot, except in this corner where it kind of included the black that we talked about earlier with my jacket, so it's not blurred, and this part is blurred. So the blurring effect, I thought, was overall the best on the Note 8. I think it did a best job of the blur effect, whereas the OnePlus 5, I would say, did the best coloring. So guys, that is going to be just a quick comparison and overall difference between all of the different photos and kind of just how great the Note 8 camera is. Now, we will be doing several video comparisons later on down the line, so I know this isn't a video part of the camera, but so far the quality's been good. We have done 2 video comparisons already between the iPhone 7 Plus, so go ahead and check out that on the channel if you want. And overall, with the video quality, we're going to test out 4K, we're going to test out 1080p at 60 FPS, and just kind of give those samplings for you guys so you guys can really see which ones are the best and how it compares, again, to other smartphones. Alright guys, hopefully you did like this video. If you did, please give a like, thumbs up down below. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section as well, just so we can always make the best kind of camera reviews for you guys. Thank you as always for watching. This has been RICKY, the YouTube Tech Guy. Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, why don't you go ahead and subscribe up there. Make sure you follow us on social media right here. And of course, check out our latest video up there. And right down here, you're going to find the perfect video for you. Or at least that's what YouTube tells me. Thanks again.